Nigga is a real thing. I don't use nigga as a term of endearment. Nigga is the distinct creation of American white supremacy. The nigga is white supremacy's Frankenstein. White supremacy's Frankenstein is causing havoc in our community. And they fear this going to, like Frankenstein did, turn against its maker. So much that is going on in the black community, proliferation of guns, drugs, the feminization of the black man, is to keep Frankenstein from turning against his maker. But it's inevitable. It will happen, but the nigga is a real thing. And we all, as sons and daughters of the American slave experience, we are born in the nigga sin and shaped in the nigga iniquity.
Of what a racist is. A racist or racism is the unjust treatment of a people by others who falsely believe that their race by nature is superior to another, and who have the political and economic and military ability to enforce their attitude. We don't have that ability. You can't pull a white man over and give him 20 tickets. Can you do that? Black police don't even think like that. Is that right? Can you turn off somebody's gas? No, you can't do that. You can get yours turned off. Is that right? So now, so we're not colored. What about Negroes? Are we Negroes? Now the term that we use today is nigga, but it's the same word. And all it means is a person that is dead. Dead mentally, dead spiritually, dead economically, dead socially. Are y'all understanding what I'm saying? The word Negro is a word that means dead. Are you with me? It's not a good word. I know what you say. You say, well, see, what you got to understand is when we call each other niggas, see, we're taking the power away from the white man. So he can't hurt us with the word. So we use the word like that, brother. Well, why don't we follow that same logic with everything else? When the police pull you over, why don't you beat yourself up? Take the power away from him to beat you up. Beat yourself up. You understand what I'm saying? When you go in the bank to get a loan for a house, ask them to give you a higher interest rate. Don't wait for them to jack the interest rate up. Tell them, look, so you don't have the power to give me a higher interest rate, I want a higher interest rate. You don't do that, do you? When you go to buy a house, tell them, I want my house on a landfill so I can die from the poisons that are coming up from under the ground. So now you don't have the power to do it. I'm going to do it to myself. That's crazy. But I'm going to tell you why we act like that. When you go to negotiate your salary, tell him you want the lowest possible salary. To remove the power from him to give you the lowest possible salary. Makes no sense. Now,
over here in his History of the Church, from January 1844, page 584, he says, and rebellious niggers in the slave states.
Yeah, nice guy, wasn't he?
This is the prophet Joseph Smith of the Mormon Church using the term niggers for black people.
And you know, the image is, see how wonderful we are. We love everybody. We're so tolerant of everything and every person. You can argue with what I say about it, but you can't argue with photostatic reprints of the original.
Yeah, because this is all coming right out of Mormon literature,
right.
And the listeners just heard themselves, and then of course we get into Brigham Young, and it
gets even worse.
It gets even worse. Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, the founder of this religion, calling the black people niggers, and the documentation is all here. I've got a handful of it right here in this book.
Right.
All these are actual photocopies right out of Mormon literature.
Right.
Here's something right out of the Book of Mormon. Looks like 3rd Nephi chapter 2, verses 15. It says, and their curse was taken away from them, and their skin became white, like unto the Nephites. You know, as you just flip through these things, you find all kinds of things that are, well, this one's real long, I won't read that, but let's see what else we got here. Where here we have, for behold, the Lord shall curse the land with much heat, and the barrenness thereof shall go forth forever. And there was a blackness came upon all the children of Canaan, and they were despised among all people.
Do you know how blacks got to be cursed according to Mormonism? According to the Mormon doctrine, they were less valiant in the pre-existence. In the pre-existence, there was a war in heaven between Satan and Jesus. And Jesus won. The demons Satan and his direct followers were cast out. The guys that didn't do much in the battle, they didn't fight much, they were cursed with dark skin. One black lady, talking to Bill McKeever, who's the director of Mormonism Research Ministry, said, let me get this straight. When we got this black skin, we were white. We did the wrong thing and we got cursed with it, so we were white. So the white people did the crime, and now we have to do the time. Is that how it works? In Mormonism, the answer is yes. Absolutely.
Amazing.
For you to decide.
And what did he say specifically to you?
Sit down, nigga.
Keyshawn Chavers is a freshman at Valley High School, a Boy Scout, a football player, a member of the ROTC, an honor roll student. He was hanging around his teacher's classroom door in December. The teacher told him to sit down, and the teacher says that Keyshawn used the N-word first.
And I just kind of was stunned a second. Well, then get away from the door, nigga. And I repeated the same insult because that's sort of what I've been trained to do.
The school district says that is not what they trained English teacher Paul Dawson to do.
He tried to say I said it, and I didn't say it, and no one else in the class knows that I said it because I didn't.
Documents from the school investigation show that several of the students interviewed from Valley did not hear Keyshawn say the N-word first. Dawson says that students use the slang version of the N-word at Valley High School all the time. He says N-I-G-G-E-R is a racial slur, but says that students use N-I-G-G-A as often as they'd say dude or hey man. And Dawson says as much as he does not like the word, he still used the slang version to feel more comfortable with black students.
Why is this word used so frequently? So I just don't understand, and I'm trying to understand. I need help. Yes, I use nigga. I've used it. I admit it. I put the H on it to emphasize it's yeah, you know, nigga this, nigga please, nigga. Hey, you know, can you lend a nigga a pencil?
What kind of
Many on the internet are up in arms over a series of photos that Lil' Kim posted on her Instagram page featuring a completely new look. In fact, she's pretty unrecognizable from what she looked like back in the 90s. Now, many people have used this story to put her down, to talk about how she sold out, to talk about how she ruined her looks. But the underlying issue is the pressure to look a certain way, to have lighter skin, and to appeal to this notion that European-looking individuals are more attractive. Now, I think this is a really interesting story, not only because of the fact that she's unrecognizable, but because of what she represented back in the 1990s and how a lot of people that looked up to her, particularly black women, now feel like she kind of let them down because she served as this incredible role model as a black woman. Regardless of what her lyrics are or how vulgar you might think they were, she represented self-confidence. She represented a black woman who wasn't afraid of her sexuality, who wasn't afraid to flaunt it. And to go through a transition of this sort, I think, makes them feel like they were let down. So let me give you some more details on that. There was a great piece written in the Daily Beast by Yaba Blay, and I think she puts this into perspective in the best possible way. She talks about how her lyrics offered us permission to explore our own bodies and our own pleasure. Lil' Kim was our champion. Now, she also says, wherever there are people of color, Southeast Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, and the United States, there is skin bleaching. And we've talked about that a lot on this show, which is interesting because if you're considered too pale and white, you're kind of pressured to tan, right? Whether it's self-tanners, spray tans, or going under those horrible tanning beds that'll give you cancer. But then if you're considered too dark, there's this pressure to lighten your skin, stay out of the sun. You don't want to get darker, right? Obviously, there's a lot more pressure toward those with darker skin than those with lighter skin, but it's a disaster either way. Also, Yaba Blay says the following. She's admitted to not feeling pretty enough. She's reflected on having lovers cheat on her with women who were more European looking.
So this story breaks my heart a little bit because I want people to be true to themselves, right? At the same time, I recognize that people have plastic surgery and they don't feel any, shame about it. And so it's not on me to put that on people who are getting it. Now, if you watch the show for a while, you've heard me say 1,000 times, my rule is 2 plastic surgeries make sense, right? I haven't had any, but I get it. If you're self-conscious about it, you got big ears and you want to pin them back or whatever, nobody's going to go ballistic over that, right? But if you overdo it, well, Lil' Kim's a good example because who are you, right? I don't know who you are anymore, right? So that's not those are not the same people. Mm-hmm. So you can say inside I'm the same, but okay, I mean, look, to me, the skin color, maybe it's the pictures that make it as stark as it looks. Yeah, she happens to be blonde for now. She'll change her hair color later, etc. But look at the nose, right? And so people get nose jobs. We've talked about that on the show, etc. Right? But are you does it make a difference if you're trying to get a quote-unquote whiter nose? I don't know. Am I judging too much if I talk about that? I don't know. But I do know this. Okay, overall macro picture. A couple of things. Look, it's not just racism. Although there is a history of racism in this country that has to be recognized. You think it didn't affect our culture at all? That if you were black, you were a slave and couldn't be free? Right? That people who were light-skinned had enormous, unbelievable advantages over people who were not. I mean, it doesn't get any more stark than free slave, right? So that's not what's happening today, but that that culture, unfortunately, has affected us through the generations. But then there's also
Even
the macro.
looking at the screen, the images hurt, to be really frank. I've known and worked with Lil' Kim for a long time. I was at Vibe, I was at Honey, I was at Essence. Some of my favorite magazine covers were with her. We used to go to fashion shows together. She's such a lovely spirit, and this beautiful brown girl that was a lightning rod in the rap game when it was so male dominated. She was the original Queen Bee. And so for many fans and many people, I adore Kim. There was a part of me that almost didn't even want to have this conversation because of that. But it is triggering really internalized pain, not just black girl pain, but you know, it's in Jamaica, it's in Thailand, it's in Asia, where this idea to be desirable, you must be white and blonde. Like, so many women all over the world have been told that for decades, for generations really, and that's what that is triggering. I haven't talked to her, so you know, I don't want to assume what her intentions are, but I do know what it's triggering in people and what it's saying to us about who is beautiful and what aesthetic do we value.
There's so much to talk about on this, but I want to expand on this black girl pain that you speak of, and as you say, yes, I mean, you know, this extends to Asia and other parts of the world as well. But you know, Lil' Kim was quoted way back in the day in 2000 in a Newsweek interview, and she said this, quote, "I have low self-esteem and I always have. Guys have always cheated on me with women who are European looking, you know, the long hair type, really beautiful women that left me thinking, how can I compete with that? Being a regular black girl wasn't good enough." So when you talk about it hurts to see these kinds of images, and when you hear possibly, you know, I don't want to suggest that this is because she felt insecure, but as a black woman, Michaela, how do you react to that when you hear that kind of pain from an interview 16 years ago?
I mean, it rings true. I mean, Kim has been forward about her struggling with her.
Research Center study shows nearly 4 in 10 millennials have at least one tattoo. So do 1/3 of Gen Xers. A market research firm says tattoos are on track to become more than $1 billion business by 2020. But the FDA says consumer complaints are also increasing. The agency recently issued a warning about the risk associated with tattoo ink, like infections and allergic reactions.
I mean, why would you have your pants that low if you don't want to show your butt? You're trying to show it's fine or something? I'm saying, let me see your butt, let me squeeze it. Look, you ain't even got no ass. Get serious. You don't even have no ass. Why you sagging, man?
Right. Did nobody say y'all could laugh?
I'm saying, dog, listen, you know what they do to people that sag in jail? Stick their fingers down their butt. They stick their fingers down their butt. It's called easy access. You sag so I can get to you.
Turn around. I don't want to see it.
Yeah, turn around. Look, you just profiling for me. You shaking and turning. Dog, you like that?
I want to let you know where that sagging shit started. It started in the penitentiary area. The bags in there would sag to advertise their ass. They get out of jail, nigga, and they put the drawers on still sagging, but try to play like they men. The kids thought the shit was slick and the kids start sagging.
You know, they got this thing where they sag their pants past their butt. It's a style, they call it some sort of gangster style. It's sexy to us, right? And see, but they weren't prepared for this, right? So you sag your pants in her, man, somebody be up in your butt.
kill the potential of any violent insurrection among black people, black men in particular. So counterinsurgency was the agenda. And they determined that after they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, Nagasaki. When the era of the nuclear bomb was born and the potential for global nuclear devastation, it was then that they determined the best war is a quiet war with silent weapons. What some have called the invisible war, the war that doesn't use bombs or even guns, but uses incapacitating agents that you don't even see coming. And it was under that theory, under the auspices of discovering counterinsurgency agents to wage a quiet war with silent weapons. They released drugs into the black community. Heroin was introduced in the 50s through the 5 mafia families of New York that moonlighted as CIA assets in the post-World War II era. But marijuana was the most successful incapacitating agent that they studied. Marijuana, your joint. Why? Crack, which they dumped first and tested in South Central Los Angeles. Crack was devastating. It devastated the physiology of the victim. It produced zombies by design. The crackhead was a tailor-made human being. They first produced it in Peru. They tested the production of the human zombie in Peru. And then they produced the human zombie in Los Angeles with crack. Crack's devastation was devastating to the black community, but it also became a drain on the economy because these drug addicts were showing up in UCLA's emergency room and USC's emergency room, and you had to take care of those patients. But marijuana was way more effective because marijuana isn't devastating. Right now, as I'm speaking, some of you saying, what that nigga talking about? I'm very functional when I'm high. And you are. You are. That's the evil of marijuana. Because it's so less harmless than heroin and cocaine. It's so inviting. And the effect that their intended effect is successful and you don't even know it. Because you don't know what their intended effect is. Their intended effect with marijuana was not devastation. It was incapacitation. Not devastation, incapacitation. And when you lift it, You ain't no good to nobody. No, you're not. I know you think you are. But when you lift it, you are subject to hyper-suggestibility. You can be manipulated, and you can be, what's the word I'm looking for? Inspired to drop out of the insurgency. You're no good to the insurgency. See, look, we here, when we say you want to come to this army, you got to put that joint down. It's not it's a moral issue. Man, it's a fight. Nigga ain't gonna be lifted next to me on the front line. The war on drugs. We talk about mass incarceration. Most of the black men in jail because of the fabricated war on drugs. Even though crack cocaine was the scapegoat, and George Bush set up a young black male in high school, Keith Jackson. He lured him through the DEA. They purposely lured a high school brother, Keith Jackson, to sell undercover agents some crack cocaine across from the White House. So George Bush can go before the people with a bag of crack cocaine that he said he was just sold across the street from the White House. And this was the justification for the draconian laws that put so many black men in jail. So they use crack as an excuse, but 90% of the black men in jail aren't in jail for crack, they're in jail for marijuana. There's a sister a very conscious sister, her husband a very conscious brother. Her 17, 18, or 19-year-old son was murdered last year. He was murdered, and this is a very conscious couple, very knowledgeable, very good. Their son was murdered on a bad weed deal. The point of my man. The seeming innocuousness, the seeming minimal danger of marijuana is precisely the ensnaring devil. Devastation in our community, legally, culturally, psychologically. More damage is done by marijuana use. And you didn't get marijuana until it passed to the streets from the CIA lab. That's a fact. So I didn't intend to talk about marijuana today, but I saw that my brother died last night. And he was a brilliant brother. And his death stands as an example of what I was talking about yesterday. These are, because see, we think we too refined to be a crackhead, right? It's the brightest of our people that are getting lifted. It's The ones with the most potential that's getting lifted. And it's the ones with the most potential that's being taken out. Put that joint down, brother. Because you are being victimized. You are being used. You are being behaviorally modified. You are being a slave to the white man. Say that again. Every time you get lifted, you being a slave to the white man. A brother asked me a question yesterday after yesterday's lecture. And his question altered what I intended to say today. The lecture I had prepared before I got here, I scrapped that because his question was so important. But before I get to that, let me put a footnote on this. The ones who released the cannabis in the community, the same ones that released crack cocaine in the community. We want to stop the killing, we say. But you can't stop something that you don't know how it got started. The level of killing that we see, that we live with in the black community, that's a recent phenomenon. We can pinpoint the origin and the source of it. It was Ronald Lister, the CIA asset, who worked with Daniel Blandon, another CIA asset, who was the one who funneled all the cocaine to Freeway Ricky Ross, who, with the help of white chemists, converted that CIA protected cocaine into crack. Daniel Blandon, the Nicaraguan CIA asset, was responsible for providing the cocaine. Ronald Lister, who answered to Steve targeted you and I with actually induces, chemically induces homosexuality in men. Do you follow? Now, many drugs, they say, besides these anti-androgens such as Depo-Provera, many drugs, such drugs appear to at least partially divert or block masculinization of the nervous system during neuroorganization. Many drugs besides these have a partial demasculizing effect. The list includes barbiturates, which are drugs, yada yada, yada yada, yada yada, marijuana. Uh-oh. Your weed family is subtly, partially feminizing you. We have documented. See how quiet it is? See how quiet it is? What? You want to get up and walk out on me like the LGBT walked out on the Honorable Mention Louis Farrakhan in Long Beach? That's what you want to do? Okay. Okay. Well, if you don't now, I'm going to work hard to make you. We have documented that the enhanced weed, now look, in this confession, marijuana is identified by the conspirators as an anti-androgen drug that assaults, that blocks the development of masculinity. We have documented that the weed that hit the streets in the late 60s came through CIA laboratories and passed first through the hands of CIA assets before you were ever able to light it up yourself. We have also documented that not only does this now popular government touch weed with its increased THC content, not only does it diminish executive cognitive function, yeah, bruh, you pretty functional when you lift it. That is true. You can go to work, and if the job ain't too complex, you can do a reasonably good job at it. We don't mess with nigga stuff. Weed, the THC, diminishes what they call executive cognitive function, that higher level thinking, that black God thinking. We have documented that not only does it poison your sperm, and I'm gonna mention why it's quiet over there. We have documented that not only does it poison your sperm, but it also mildly feminizes you. We're going to look at some of the manifestations of the mild feminization. But we also documented that since 1975, the U.S. government has made imported and domestically grown marijuana effectively an ethnic weapon against black people by contaminating much, if not most, if not all, of weed plants with a dangerous pesticide called paraquat. Paraquat has what's called a melanin affinity. That means the toxic chemical binds to melanated tissue, and it attaches and stays in melanated bodies for life, releasing poisons into the body. Weed has been weaponized, ethnically weaponized against black people. Yeah. Weed smoking is the religion of black folks 45 and under, including those of us in here.
Operations by selling opium, which is grown from poppies, which are right now being harvested. So here's the question: why are American troops now helping Afghan farmers grow that opium? Nick Schifrin reports from Afghanistan on a controversial new policy.
In western Kandahar, poppy farmers score, till, harvest their crop, and the Americans do nothing to stop them.
I'll start pushing slow. Salaam Alaikum.
U.S. soldiers greet farmers.
Can you show me which poppy field is yours?
They commiserate with farmers having a bad harvest.
Tell him I'm very sorry for his field this year, and hopefully he has a better harvest next year.
And in one case, they even paid a farmer $1,000 after U.S. and Afghan special forces burned his crop.
If you can come down to the base or on my next visit, I'll make a payment.
This is controversial. The opium trade is the Taliban's main source of funding.
Around here, this poppy isn't only a plant, it's the very basis of the economy here. Poppy grows everywhere in this area, and most of the farmers base their entire income for the entire season on this harvest.
And that's why soldiers ignore and encourage the farmers. If the U.S. burned their crop, farmers would blame the U.S. for their poverty and turn toward the Taliban. I'm not going to lie to you, this farmer says. If my poppy were destroyed, I would be very angry.
If we secure them having a good harvest, now they're going to get paid for all their hard work, and then we can deal with the trafficking afterwards.
And that is the new U.S. policy. After farmers get paid, try to capture drug traffickers. These troops have confiscated 10,000 pounds of opium before the profit reached the Taliban. One day the U.S. hopes to...
in a sense, a victim of their success, because now the population is, they have these opium fields, and we are tolerating it. We are tolerating the cultivation of the opium, because we know that if we were to destroy it now, the population would turn against the Marines, and it would be a real security risk. Let me introduce...
Most of our inner cities are in the plight that they are in. And a lot of this has been out there for years, but it wasn't until recently that the story broke again. And my next guest is a reporter, not from San Diego, California, but from San Jose Mercury News. And he wrote a story called The Dark Alliance. Please welcome Mr. Gary Webb to the show. And Gary, this really, I think the current fervor over this issue is because of your article. A lot of people may not be familiar with what the Dark Alliance meant and stands for. Why don't you tell America what the story is about first, and then we'll talk about the issues.
It was about a cocaine ring that operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s. And they were funneling, they were selling cocaine in South Central. They were also selling it in Oakland. They were selling it in San Francisco. They were selling it in San Jose. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, called the FDN. This was an army that the CIA started in 1981 and supported.
Better known to us, most of us who remember news, the Contras. In Nicaragua, so go right ahead.
The men that were running the cocaine ring were top officials of this Contra Army. And what we found was that they were selling this stuff in South Central, which is, you know, predominantly black section of Los Angeles, immediately before the outbreak of the crack cocaine epidemic. They started selling powder. Tons and tons and tons of powder cocaine was going into this one small area of the city. And from there, they sold it to Freeway Rick. And Freeway Rick took the powder, turned it into crack, and starting in 1983, 1984, began distributing it to predominantly the gangs, the Crips and the Bloods in Los Angeles. And they spread it, you know, from there.
From there. Now, since this has happened, you have butted heads with everybody in Washington, D.C. trying to get information about the story. Have you not?
Yeah, we worked on this for a year, and it was only because, you know, some people at National Archives believe freedom of information means freedom of information. We got some documents that showed that pretty strongly that there were some CIA connections.
Let's talk a little bit about those documents for a second, because there's a gentleman, this figure that we talked about yesterday on the show. His name is Blandón. Danilo Blandón, who was a person who was a member of the aristocracy of Nicaragua before the fall of Somoza, and then he fled and comes to the United States and decides, while he's in the United States, so you can all understand this, he wants to raise money for their revolutionaries who are trying to overthrow the government that just overthrew them. So here in the United States, they try to do fundraisers and that doesn't work, and then Blandón gets a scheme, well, I can get some cocaine cheaply with some help from some of my friends and get it into the United States of America. All I need to find is somebody who can sell it. So they find a gentleman by the name of Rick Ross, who is Freeway Rick. Rick Ross comes in and starts selling cocaine in terms of beginning 1 or 2 grams. And within weeks, 2, 3, 4 kilos a week. Within months, what was it, 10 to 15 kilos a day. Ricky Ross was selling cocaine to the point of making $3 to $4 million a day. He sold so much cocaine, it hurt his fingers to count the money. Not only in Los Angeles, but in Cincinnati, in St. Louis, all the way across America. So some can say, and this is the reason why people are so angry at you in your article, is that Ricky Ross, the dope dealer, was supplied by the CIA because Blandón was an operative for the CIA, correct?
Blandón and Meneses were working for an army that was a wholly owned subsidiary of the CIA. They were meeting with CIA agents. Blandón, and this came out in court. I mean, Danilo Blandón is now a government witness. He works for the Drug Enforcement Administration. And we've paid him, I don't know, $166,000 over the last 18 months because he's such a good informant. So they put him on the witness stand in Ricky Ross's case. And he testified that in 1981, he went to Honduras. He met with the commander, the military commander of the CIA's army, and he was instructed to go raise money in California for this Contra Army. And he was told that the ends justified the means.
And those ends being sell cocaine if you have to.
Well, look, he was in the room with the Nicaraguan representative of the Cali cartel, Mr. Meneses, and he was in the room with a government marketing expert named Danilo Blandón. Now, if they weren't talking about selling cocaine, I don't know what they were talking about.
And this is all information they can find on the website, to use that website, but on the website on the internet. So we're going to put that up so people can go and
look at these documents.
Take a look at the documents yourself and judge it. But Michael, now, I mean, there's a stretch here. Here's a guy who is obviously a CIA operative, Mr. Blandón, who is working with this government-backed army that we've kind of created in Nicaragua. But how the heck does this guy get to bring in tons of cocaine? When I say ton, I'm talking tons. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tons of cocaine weekly in the United States of America for 7 years, and no one can ever catch him.
Well, number one, Mr. Meneses was actually indicted in 1984. He was known within, my own sources in DEA told me he was known as El Rey de la Droga, the king of drugs. He was in more than 40 files and indicted mysteriously, and people within DEA say that it was CIA intervention that kept this sealed indictment from ever being opened. So he was well known. He was well known. The connection between him, Blandón, and Calero, who was the head of the Nicaraguan government in exile, is clear. There's a clear evidentiary.
We got a picture of it.
Yeah, there's a clear evidentiary trail. Now, if you want to follow that trail up, you have to first understand how CIA and DEA work. I was a country attaché assigned to Argentina. Now, during those years, there were people who I inherited on the payroll who were murderers. They were also on the CIA payroll.
Murders on the CIA payroll.
Not only murders, I'm talking about mass murders. And I wrote about it in books that I thought would have America marching on Washington. Nothing ever happened.
How are you alive today?
A miracle. Just absolutely.
Why didn't the CIA bump you off before you came to the Montel Williams show? Because to me, they will say tomorrow, he's a kook, he's crazy, don't believe anything he has to say, don't worry about it, there's no conspiracy.
Well, at the same time, DEA called me one of their best in a New York Times article. The only thing I can say, Montel, I lost my son, I lost my brother because of this phony CIA-backed drug flow. Somebody once said that if you don't have anything in your life to die for, you don't have anything to live for. And after losing my son, that's the story of my life. God bless Gary Webb. I've been trying to tell this, and other DEA agents are now coming out trying to tell this story.
Let me take a break. When we come back, we got a lot of people who disagree with all of this.
Planned Parenthood, they get $550 million of taxpayer money to continue their work. They're the largest abortion provider in the nation, and you're paying for it. So in any event, Margaret Sanger was the founder of Planned Parenthood. And go back and read her writings. She wrote a monograph that I read called Reading the Thoroughbred. And what Margaret Sanger believed was there were defective, genetically defective people. They were Roman Catholics. They were evangelical Protestants. They were Southern Europeans. They were Latinos. And especially they were African Americans. And what she advocated was find a leader among the black community that is highly respected. Let him be our spokesperson and lead the black people toward euthanasia. That was the game. I mean, it's all spelled out, it's all written out. I don't know why people don't read that stuff, because she said it, that's what she wanted to do. The Nazis, on the other hand, had a term, useless eaters. They found people that they thought were defective, and they wanted to sterilize them, and of course, ultimately murder them. We can't have a concept of people who can be destroyed by the government. It's not good. And yet we have that, this country, and the big money, the Rockefeller Foundation and others, went to support Planned Parenthood. Why?
Drive-by shootings is organ stealing.
I'm worth $50 million and I need a kidney. And you know, kidneys are pretty sensitive. You gotta find somebody who really got the kidney that matches yours. You think I'm gonna wait till somebody die for me to get one? If I don't get one soon, I'ma die. So guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna pay somebody to go research people. Okay, let's go look at all the black organ donors. Let's look at all the black people who got organ donor on their driver's license, which is why I'm not a friend of that. I say, if you wanna donate your organs, put it in your will. Say that if I die, this can go to my family, my relatives, my friends, or whomever. But when you put it on your license, I believe you make yourself a public target. And so what did they find? We got a guy in Los Angeles. He has the same blood type as you, same kidney type as you likely. He healthy though. He ain't likely to die no time soon. He don't know you, so he ain't gonna give you no organ for free. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to arrange a murder that makes it look like he was in a car accident. We're going to arrange a murder that makes it look like he committed suicide. So the next thing you know, you coming out the gas station, boom, you get hit by a Mack truck. You dead, gone. You get taken to the funeral home. Your family come to the funeral. They don't know that before your body got laid to rest, a little hole was poked and they pulled your kidney out.
A lot of people don't know, when you get arrested or even when you get convicted, a lot of times law enforcement or police will swab your mouth for DNA. And now they have your DNA record on file, they have your genetic information on file. And you have to understand, with law enforcement, a lot of times they'll sell your information to tabloids and, like, especially celebrities, they sell their information to tabloids and magazines and news outlets all the time. So it's not a stretch to believe that they won't use your DNA or your genetic information for nefarious reasons.
You, my son, cops come by and inform me you just been shot dead. You don't have jurisdiction over that body. That's the coroner. You can't get that body till the coroner release you. So we'll get released, we go down and pick it up, and I see all these cuts and these stitches. I just thought they was doing a routine investigation, following the family. I didn't know they took your organs. I'm under all this stress, my son is dead. Now you buried now, I can't dig you up because the court got to have permission. Most of those cases is organ stealing.
It's been known for a long time, even back in slavery times, that black organs were considered superior genetically to other folks' organs. For example, whenever there's a transplant, okay, especially when rich folks get heart transplant, liver transplant, kidney transplant, they like white, they like black organs. We had a famous case in Pennsylvania, Governor Casey, who was one of the most racist governors who ever lived back in the late 80s, early 90s. He had a heart transplant. Guess whose heart they gave him? A black person's heart.
Down in Georgia, there was a case of an African-American 17-year-old kid who was found mysteriously dead at school. He died in the gym, they did an autopsy and they buried him. His family, they weren't satisfied with the results because they still wanted to know what happened to their son. They had the body exhumed, found out that his organs were missing and his body was stuffed with newspapers, and people are still trying to find answers. The officials down there in Georgia, they act like they don't know what's going on. There was another case out here in California. A young African-American man was found dead in Death Valley in the desert. All of his organs were missing. His liver, heart, lungs, kidneys, all gone. There's a case in the UK recently. A Somalian girl was brought over there for organ harvesting. They found out that they were going to harvest her organs and they stopped that. There was another case in Asian couples. They went over to Africa. They adopted a black girl. 2 weeks later, she was dead. So these cases of organ harvesting are just going on all over the world, and people are being real quiet about it.
1999. There are an estimated 1,200 war veterans awaiting arm transplants. Pints of blood, $25 to $337. Blood siphoning is when a person's blood is taken against their will. It is most common in India, where hospitals are desperate for supplies. Pair of eyeballs, $1,525. While over 400,000 corneal transplants are performed yearly, full eye transplants may be possible in the near future. Coronary artery, $1,525. The first coronary artery graft was performed in the U.S. in 1960. 395,000 artery grafts have been completed since then. Small intestine, $2,519. Intestinal grafts take 10 hours in surgery and 1 year to recover. Sufferers of Crohn's disease often require intestinal grafts. Heart, $119,000. The first heart transplant was performed in Cape Town in 1967. 3,158 people are currently waiting for a viable heart transplant. Liver, $157,000. There are 16,000 people awaiting liver transplants in the U.S. One-year patient survival rates post-surgery are 80 to 85%. Kidney, $262,000. Kidneys make up 75% of the global illegal market trade. Over 800,000 people are waiting up to 5 years for a kidney transplant. Skin, $10 per square inch. Skin grafts are performed on burn victims and patients with damaged skin. Most skin grafts are successful while others require a second surgery. Bone marrow.
The situation in Chicago, man. I'm from Chicago, born and raised there. I ran those streets of Chicago and changed my life. But I want to kind of make people aware of some things that you don't know, because you've never really been out there and then you wouldn't know it. And it's going to be hard to believe, but myself, for a fact, and several others that I ran with know this to be the truth. Growing up in Chicago in the early 90s, the same situation was happening. I've been in Chicago where a person came into my house and knocked on the door to come and get me early in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, and said, come with me, man, it's a crate of guns in the alley. And I got up and ran out there, and sure enough, there was a crate of guns. And during that time when we in it, you're not thinking about where did the guns just come from. You know, you never think about that type of stuff, like where did the guns come from and why are they here. But now that I'm older, I can kind of tell you that it's a diabolical plot. Nothing is stopped. The guns are still there. The guns are still being placed in these different strategic communities. It's a plan. It's not out in Bridgeview. It's not out in, Westmount. They're putting it in the hundreds for sure. Yeah, they're putting it on 55th. They're putting it in Inglewood. 6:30 in the morning while older people that's at work, you sleep. You're not outside. So, you got the streetwalkers and the people that's out, they hustling and they out all types of day. Yeah, they're the ones that's going to run across them, and who would go and tell the police? I never went to go tell the police when we found some guns. That don't even make sense. Why would you go tell the police? So people are wondering why so much violence. Think about it. You think about this. Okay, the police are locking people up constantly in Chicago every single day. They're taking guns off the street every single day, every day. So how is it that all of these guns just keep appearing? Where are all the guns coming from? Nobody's going to the gun store buying these guns. So where are all these guns? Now, this is another part that you don't know. I was so used to having exotic guns that I thought that was the norm. You understand what I'm saying? I'm saying far as, I don't know if are you familiar with guns, but a fully automatic handgun is almost impossible to get. You know what I'm saying? A fully automatic assault rifle, that's not common. It may sound common, but that's not common. A Uzi that's fully automatic, that's not common. So I was so used to having everything in the area that I knew of was fully. It shot fully automatic, fully. So me being 17 and 18 and in my 20s, I was so naive that I believed that's how all guns was. I seen so many different exotic guns on the street running around in different areas with the guys just running around. I thought that was the norm. So now I'm an older gentleman. I'm out here, I switch my life around. I'm living right, So now I cleared my name up and got my record sealed. And I'm going to the gun shop and I'm going to the shooting range, shooting like I'm supposed to. And I go into gun stores and I'm asking for certain guns and they looking at me like I'm crazy. Like I made that gun up. These These are guns that I've seen several times in different areas that the gun store is saying, how would that be on the street? That's something that you would have to get specialized, customized. You see what I'm saying? But these guns are on the streets of Chicago. And my point to you is, yeah, we can't try to make an excuse for the kids out there shooting, and it ain't all kids, but we can't make an excuse, but I want you to look at the bigger picture. Where are they getting the guns from? It's not one or two areas. It's not one or two areas. It's everywhere. In the urban community is what I'm telling you. And not dropping them out there in Hillcrest. They're not gonna be out there. You check in them hundreds. You check on the low end. You check in the heart of the city, in the inner city. That's where they're dropping all the guns at. That's where all the killings is happening at. That's why a lot of innocent people are getting shot, stuff like that. Because of these guns. They got guns that they can't control. They shoot these guns, letting off, man, 100 shots, man, in 30 seconds. These guns are not being bought. They don't have no gun license to buy these guns. So where are they getting the guns from? That's the question. I'm telling you right now. They've been dropping the guns off in crates for years. They've been doing it. I've seen it twice in my lifetime. I seen it in 1990, and then I seen it again in 1999. I seen it with my own eyes. You can believe it or not, but that's the honest to God truth. I went out, I seen the guns in the crate myself, and they went out through the whole area. Everybody got this one, grab that one. Let me get that one. I grabbed it. Everybody got it. And that's what they keep doing. That's how the guns keep getting on the streets. That's why the wars don't stop. You see what I'm saying? That's the part that people gotta focus on. The gun control, how you gonna control something if you study putting it down there? That's propaganda when they saying it's gun control, or we lobbying for gun control. You're not trying to control nothing when you study putting guns out there. They giving it to them. Now they want to give them the guns so they can catch them with the guns. Either they're gonna kill somebody with the gun, then they get to lock them up, or they catch them with the gun and they get to lock them up. Either way, it's lose, 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 lose. You see what I'm saying? It's a business for them. It's a business. You know what I'm saying? It's like me wanting to sell a drug, but I gotta get you hooked first. You know, it's a business for them. So the more people that they can catch with guns, or the more people that commit crimes with guns, they get to lock them up. To them, it's just a number. They don't care. They don't care who it is. But it's more of the African community that's you know, we're the victims. And I hate that everything boils down to race and all of that. I'm not a racist, but the truth is the truth. And I'm just telling it how it is, you know what I'm saying? I go to Chicago all the time, but if I go out to Westmount, Illinois, where one of my good white friends live, and I go with him, it's a different community. It's a different community. Ain't nobody running around with no guns. Ain't nobody doing nothing. I go out there, I feel safe. As soon as I go where I grew up at, I'm not getting out the car without no gun, because I don't trust nobody, because everybody around here got a gun. Everybody got a gun. You hear that part? That's the part that matters. Everybody got a gun, from the 14-year-old on up. Everybody got one. They ain't doing nothing with it. They just got one. But how do everybody got all these guns? Where they come from? Right back to that again. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The guns are being deliberately placed, strategically placed in certain communities to target certain individuals. Please pay attention. Please research it. Check it out. Ask some of the OGs who've been around, and they'll tell you the same thing, that I'm not lying. I'm just willing to expose it. I'm trying to tell you the truth.
More about hustling and trying to get money. The younger generation now, not so focused on money. They're more focused on violence, killing, and you know what I'm saying, all the internet, social media, wars, violence, and all that. You know, and then just spills out into the streets. You know, and all day long they ride around trying to find somebody to shoot.
Is everything different now? You know what I'm saying? And it all started from the way they just took all the gang leaders out the hood. You know what I'm saying? It changed everything.
Duop took us to meet Bo Deal, a rapper from the West Side, the most dangerous part of the city. Like Duop, his music is drill.
My conscience can't break me. I deal with it.
Hardcore hip-hop native to Chicago that reflects a life of poverty, drugs and violence.
The past few months, I done seen more people close to me and more people that I know that's been shot and killed than I have ever.
I never was gonna go.
Everybody got a gun. I don't know, listen, I never seen so many guns. Like, we had a lot of guns, but I never seen so many guns like now, ever. It's like they dropped. It's like they dropped off, like somebody dropped off crates of guns in everybody's hood. Like, it seemed like it was designed for a motherfucker to lose. Like, somebody putting all these guns here. Well, you got little kids and everybody got guns. And they don't got just little 22s. And when we was coming up, it was 22s, 25s, 38s. And they got big guns and 30-shot clips and shit. I think that a lot of guys need to die in order to make it better. I think some of these niggas need to get killed and knocked off to get them out the way, make it a better place, because some of them.
Okay, so we've been stood here for like 5 minutes. I've seen 2 police cars, 1 ambulance kind of go by.
Yeah, I mean, it ain't safe over here at all.
It's fucked up. All you can do is pray. All you can do is pray and try to live right, because life is short. And your life can end like that. So all you can do is try and help as many people as you can while you're here. Tell the people that, I tell all my brothers, all my family, man, I love you. I love you. I love you, because you never know when it's the last time that you're going to see me. All right, hold on.
Hello?
Hey, Joel.
Yeah.
That was good. What just happened? Why did we have to leave so quickly?
Because they in a war around us. The 2 gangs that's around us, they in beat. That's why so many people get shot in their area. But somebody just got shot like a couple blocks up. He told me to hurry up and get y'all, you know what I'm saying, on the expressway, because it wasn't safe over there.
So it wasn't safe for us to stay?
Yeah, it wasn't safe for us to stay, because somebody could have just pulled up on us and did a drive-by.
I travel the world, man. Like, I done lived in Europe. I done been in the military. I done been to Iraq. I travel the world, man. I done seen a lot. I view it as like a third world country, man. Like, this place not normal here. And we understand that. That's the crazy part.
Sometimes it does look normal. But this party on Duop's block is to remember his best friend, who was gunned down nearby.
There's a serious neighborhood problem in St. Louis, Kansas City, Atlanta, South Carolina, and various little cities. There's a big problem in Baltimore, Detroit, Chicago, Houston, you know, so I mean, and Denver, Seattle, and you know, it's just not the news highlights are saying, well, this is off the Ken case. This is off a lot of unanswered questions in the neighborhood.
Let me bring in for an answered question from these 2 gentlemen. Mitch in Kansas. Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, I have I'd like to get an opinion here. Back in the 70s, we had Earth Day, where we had blacks and whites and Hispanics and Asians together. Recently, we had the pro-choice and the pro-life walks at the Capitol with over 1 million people. Why can't somebody in the black community step forward now and mobilize people and show the government and the racists out there and the pessimists that yes, we can change, but if we have to do it together?
Well, what I think is your comparison to the other forms of, I think you mentioned an environmental equilibrium as well as, I guess, an abortion's rights equilibrium. Everyone's together and happy. Black people in this country have done everything they can to be a part of America. Now, I personally feel as though that this is totally due to miseducation, black people wanting to be a part of America. But historically, we've showed over and over again. We've stuck our hand out and have gotten it chopped off over and over again. How many kings must be destroyed?
But aren't you doing some of your own chopping now? I mean, you know that most of the victims in Los Angeles, in terms of the store owners and in terms of the corpses, are black. And for you to sit here and say, well, this is justified because of historical reasons, because in the long run, I mean, aren't you just saying it's okay to sacrifice us? And what's going to be the impact of sacrificing yourselves, of putting blacks out of business and killing blacks on black advancement?
I don't think we're putting blacks out of business because...
You are. But
the reality to economics, business economics, first of all, is that we don't even own the land we got our business on. At any time, the cops could kick in our door and say, you're selling drugs in your business and drag you out and throw you in jail.
And that doesn't happen that often.
Oh, wait a minute. It does.
But listen,
it does. This happens every single day in America.
The problem that I'm having with what you're saying is that you're taking such a wide perspective, which is admirable,
millions of people and hundreds of years.
But the specifics of what is happening in Los Angeles, in a nutshell, it seems to me can be put this way. Blacks are making life harder for blacks. It's not just what's happening now. You know, when a lot of these businesses that are just partially ruined are built back, the insurance rates in these neighborhoods are going to put more people out. So how does this help?
No, let's say this. Blacks are helping the insurance companies get paid.
But yes, I understand. That is one way to look at it.
There's many ways we could look at this.
But why don't we look at it for the moment in terms of the harm blacks are doing to blacks in Los Angeles?
I would say the situation is going to be rough from 10 to 15 years from now. But it's a studying point that in order for the black community to really get control of itself, which it has never been allowed to truly have, you got to talk about reparations have to be paid back to black people. I'm talking from the root, from the beginning, tons.
How are they paid? Are they paid in money?
Oh, well, in the system right now, we have to have our own control over media. We have to have land. We have to be given so much to repay ourselves from back then, the years that a lot of white people say that don't count, in order for us to get to a point where we can come up to a point where we're really, truly equal.
I'm sorry, Chris, I told you. Computers, people aren't going to hear it anyhow. It's an inappropriate time for a break, and here it is.
Securities that they've had ever since they were a little punk kid, and they became a cop just in order to do that. And they take those badges and they try to play God with them, you know. Cops don't go to jail for murder, we do. You know, they get laid.
After more than 20 years, I've finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning point in popular music, and ultimately American society. I have struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making this story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for. Between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came from Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then. Since technology and media weren't accessible to people like they are today, the industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted. This may explain why in early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of music business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Little did I know that we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practice I've ever seen. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people being there, most of them familiar faces. Speaking to those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting as many of us did not care for rap music and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private gathering to discuss its future. Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be in our industry. Our casual chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign a confidentiality agreement preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during the meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued and in some cases disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long but very clear on the matter and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination. We asked several people what this meeting was about and the reason for such secrecy but couldn't find anyone who had answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. No one stopped them. I was tempted to follow but curiosity got the best of me. A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected the agreements from us. Quickly after the meeting began, one of my industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everyone else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no further details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but it was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industry and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point I began to feel slightly uncomfortable at the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement. He explained that the companies we work for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in confusion. At the time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with us. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employers had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by marketing music which promotes criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employee, we'd also be able to buy personal stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point things became chaotic. 2 of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted out and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd and all 4 of us were escorted outside. My industry colleague who had opened the meeting earlier hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking about this publicly or even with those who attended the meeting. I asked him why he was involved with something this corrupt and he replied that it was bigger than the music business and nothing we'd want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested and as he walked back into the house I remember word for word the last thing he said, "It's out of my hands now. Remember you signed an agreement." He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to our cars and actually watched until we drove off. A million things were going through my mind as I drove away and I eventually decided to pull over and park on a side street in order to collect my thoughts. I replayed everything in my mind repeatedly and it all seemed very surreal to me. I was angry with myself for not having taken a more active role in questioning what had been presented to us. I'd like to believe the shock of it all is what suspended my better nature. After what seemed like an eternity, I was able to calm myself enough to make it home. I didn't talk or call anyone that night. The next day back at the office, I was visibly out of it but blamed it on being under the weather. No one else in my department had been invited to the meeting and I felt a sense of guilt for not being able to share what I had witnessed. I thought about contacting the 3 others who were kicked out of the house but I didn't remember their names and thought that tracking them down would probably bring unwanted attention. I considered speaking out publicly at the risk of losing my job but I realized I'd probably be jeopardizing more than my job and I wasn't willing to risk anything happening to my family. I thought about those men with guns and wondered who they were. I had been told that this was bigger than the music business and all I could do was let my imagination run free. There were no answers and no one to talk to. I tried to do a little bit of research on private prisons but didn't uncover anything about the music business involvement. However, the information I did find confirmed how dangerous this prison business really was. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Eventually, it was as if the meeting had never taken place. It all seemed surreal. I became more reclusive and stopped going to any industry events unless professionally obligated to do so. On 2 occasions, I found myself attending the same function as my former colleague. Both times, our eyes met but nothing more was exchanged. As the months passed, rap music had definitely changed direction. I was never a fan of it but even I could tell the difference. Rap acts that talked about politics or harmless fun were quickly fading away as gangster rap started dominating the airwaves. Only a few months had passed since the meeting but I suspect that the ideas presented that day had been successfully implemented. It was as if the order has been given to all major label executives. The music was climbing the charts and most companies were more than happy to capitalize on it. Each one was churning out their very own gangster rap acts on an assembly line. Everyone bought into it, consumers included. Violence and drug use became a central theme in most rap music. I spoke to a few of my peers in the industry to get their opinions on the new trend but was told repeatedly that it was all about supply and demand. Sadly, many of them even expressed that the music reinforced their prejudice of minorities. I officially quit the music business in 1993 but my heart had already left months before. I broke ties with the majority of my peers and removed myself from this thing I had once loved. I took some time off, returned to Europe for a few years, settled out of state, and lived a quiet life away from the world of entertainment. As the years passed, I managed to keep my secret, fearful of sharing it with the wrong person but also a little ashamed of not having had the balls to blow the whistle. But as rap got worse, my guilt grew. Fortunately, in the late 90s, Having the internet as a resource which wasn't at my disposal in the early days made it easier for me to investigate what is now labeled the prison industrial complex. Now that I have a greater understanding of how private prisons operate, things make much more sense than they ever have. I see how the criminalization of rap music played a big part in promoting racial stereotypes and misguided so many impressionable young minds into adopting these glorified criminal behaviors which often lead to incarceration. 20 years of guilt is a heavy load to carry, but the least I can do now is to share my story, hoping that fans of rap music realize how they've been used for the past 2 decades. Although I plan on remaining anonymous for obvious reasons, my goal now is to get this information out to as many people as possible. Please help me spread the word. Hopefully, others who attended the meeting back in 1991 will be inspired by this and tell their own stories. Most importantly, if only one life has been touched by my story, I pray it makes the weight of my guilt a little more tolerable. Thank you.
Violent crime in America had tripled in the previous 30 years, and the police force had only increased by 10%. So we put 100,000 more police on the streets so they could be tied to the community. And we passed the Brady Bill and the assault weapons ban, which had an ammunition limit on the clips, as I remember, of about 10 bullets. And we passed funds to give people something to say yes to in the after-school hours, not just to say no to. But in that bill, there were longer sentences. And most of these people are in prison under state law, but the federal law set a trend. And that was overdone. We were wrong about that. That percentage of it, we were wrong about. So the good news is we had the biggest drop in crime in history and the first 8-year decline in crime in history. The bad news is we had a lot of people who were essentially locked up, who were minor actors for way too long. And when I was in office at the end of my term, we took care of some of them, the so-called girlfriend cases in drug busts, where all these young women, many of whom weren't even involved in any drug transaction, wouldn't rat out their boyfriends, and so they wound up getting set up the river. Then the boyfriend would sometimes rat out somebody else and get a shorter sentence than the woman did. So we reviewed them all and tried to correct that problem. But the larger problem is the one President Obama is now trying to address, those people who just have sentences that cannot be justified by their length compared to what they did. And that's important.
You recognize that. That is my drawing.
That's supposed to be America. Supposed to be. Reasonable facsimile. Now, brothers, sisters, you didn't come on the Mayflower. Did you? You didn't come on the Nina de Pinta or the Santa Maria, did you? In the holds of ships. For what purpose? To be made not just slaves, but the perpetual property of your slave masters. Now listen to this word, perpetual. You all right? Yes, sir. I'm almost finished. Now, how are us, to be the perpetual property of white people? How could he do that? He said, I'll take away their names, their language, their history, their culture, their religion, and I'll grow them up disconnected with their roots in Africa. They won't have any other teacher but me. White man talking. And for 300 years, as I sell them like a piece of property, I'm going to deprive them of what every human being needs to function. Knowledge. They will not be permitted to read a book. Not even Harry Potter. As if them niggas read Harry Potter, they might find a broom or something and fly away. Because they'll be singing that song, I'll fly away one of these days. But you ain't gone no place yet. He still gotcha. You're my niggas. You're my property. You're my whore. You're my bitch. Because I'm going to turn you, black woman, from the woman of God into a human dog, where your men will make merchandise of you. I'm gonna turn you. Has he done it? Respite me till the day when they are raised. Who is gonna raise them? Who can take them from the power of the enemy that has put them to death? The book says, shall the prey be taken from the mighty, and the lawful captive be delivered. You are a prey in the hands of your slave masters and their children. Look at it. Look at yourself. Look at it. I made my niggas slaves, and then I wanted to be free from the British. So one of my niggas was the first to die for a freedom for me that he don't enjoy. They called his name Crispus Attucks. My niggas fighting on the side of the British, fighting on the side of the American revolutionaries, but not raised in consciousness. I got my niggas. Sing me one of the songs of Zion, nigga. Sing! You can sing. But the book says, how can I sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Well, dance for me, nigga. Make me laugh. Those that wasted us, that carried us away captive, required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth. Come on, Steve Harvey. Come on, Hughley. Come on, Cedric. Come on, make me laugh, nigga. I'll give you a lot of money. I'll make you a nigga millionaire. Make me laugh. A nation of clowns. A nation of fools. A nation of buffoons. But not me, you say. I'm a graduate from Harvard University. I'm a graduate from Yale. Well, I graduated from Morehouse to become what? An educated nigga, the property of your master. Respite me. Delay my doom till the day when they are raised. Who will raise them? If the enemy said in the Virginia House of Delegates that he had closed every avenue by which light could enter the slave's mind. Taught you of a heaven way up there. You building one right here for him. Taught you of a hell that you're going to get, a fire that you're going to burn in under the ground, and he's burning you at the stake and making you look at your brothers burning, hanging, castrated. Or have you forgotten? Well, wait a minute, Farrakhan. That was a long time ago. We've moved on from that. We're trying to forget those things. Nigga, please. How in the hell can you forget what made you the nigga that you are right now? How can you forget what made you the whore, the bitch, the freak, the dope seller, the drive-by shooter, the gang-banger, the pimp, the hustler, the liar, the thief, the adulterer, the fornicator? How can you forget? How can you forget?